What if I told you that Elvis Presley's final words weren't spoken to his family, his doctor, or even his closest friends, but to three teenage strangers who had been camping outside Graceland gates for 2 days, and that what he told them in those final hours would reveal the deepest secret he'd been carrying for 20 years? You'd probably think I was crazy, right? But what happened on the night of August 15th, 1977, just hours before Elvis would be found unconscious in his bathroom, was so extraordinary that the three people who witnessed it kept it secret for decades, until one deathbed confession would finally reveal the truth about Elvis's final night alive. But here's the thing that'll blow your mind. Elvis wasn't supposed to be at those gates that night. In fact, his security team had strict orders to keep him inside the mansion. So, what made the king of rock and roll sneak out of his own house at 2 a.m. to have a conversation that would haunt these fans for the rest of their lives? Let me tell you about the night that changed everything we thought we knew about Elvis's final hours. It started 3 days earlier, when 17-year-old Jenny Morrison, her best friend Carol, and Carol's boyfriend Mike drove all the way from Ohio to Memphis, not knowing they were about to become part of rock and roll history. They'd heard Elvis was back home at Graceland after his latest tour, and, like thousands of fans before them, they just wanted to catch a glimpse of their hero. But something was different about this particular weekend. Something the fans couldn't have known, something that would make Elvis do the most dangerous thing he'd ever done in his entire career. Here's what nobody knew at the time, and this is the part that will give you chills. Elvis had made a decision that weekend that terrified everyone around him. A decision so shocking that Colonel Parker had threatened to quit, that his father, Vernon, had literally gotten on his knees and begged him to reconsider. Elvis Presley was planning to tell the world everything, every secret, every lie, every manipulation that had controlled his life for 20 years, and he was going to do it at a press conference scheduled for August 17th, 1977. But first, he needed to do something he'd never done before. He needed to talk to his fans, really talk to them, not as Elvis the superstar, but as Elvis the man who was about to risk everything for the truth. If you think you know how this story ends, trust me, you don't. Because what happened at those Graceland gates on August 15th was so incredible that when these fans finally came forward with their story, 40 years later, even Elvis historians didn't believe them at first. Hit that subscribe button now, because this story is about to take a turn that will leave you absolutely speechless. Jenny Morrison was the first to notice something was wrong. She'd been sitting by those gates for 2 days, and she'd gotten used to the routine. Security guards would come and go. Occasionally fans would get moved along, but the mansion itself always seemed quiet and distant. But on the night of August 15th, at exactly 1:47 a.m., Jenny saw something that made her heart stop. A light in one of the upstairs windows started flashing in a pattern. 3 long flashes, 3 short, 3 long. It was Morse code for SOS. "Carol, Mike, you guys need to see this," Jenny whispered, shaking her friends awake. But when they looked up at the window, the flashing had stopped. The mansion was dark again. That's when they heard footsteps on the gravel, and what they saw next was impossible. Walking toward them through the darkness, alone and without any security, was Elvis Presley himself. But here's the part that'll shock you. Elvis didn't look like the man they'd seen in concerts or on TV. He looked tired, scared, and somehow smaller than life. When he reached the gates where the 3 teenagers were sitting, he said something that would haunt them forever. "Y'all been out here for days, haven't you?" Elvis said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. I've been watching you from my window, and I keep thinking, these kids don't know what they're really looking at. They don't know who I really am." What happened next was a conversation that lasted 4 hours and revealed secrets about Elvis's life that no biography, no documentary, no tell-all book has ever shared. Because what Elvis told these 3 strangers that night was the truth he'd been planning to tell the world, the truth that would die with him just hours later. Carol, who was the bravest of the 3, asked the question that opened the floodgates. "Mr. Presley, are you okay? You seem different." That's when Elvis did something that shocked all 3 of them. He sat down right there on the gravel, on the outside of his own gates, and started talking like he'd been waiting his whole life for someone to ask that question. "You want to know the truth?" Elvis said, his voice breaking. "I haven't been okay for 20 years, not since I signed that contract. Not since I let them turn me into something I was never supposed to be." For the next hour, Elvis told these 3 teenagers things that would make them understand why he'd been acting so strange in recent months, why he'd been talking about wanting to disappear, why he'd been making mysterious phone calls at all hours of the night. But here's where the story gets absolutely incredible, and this is the part that took investigators 40 years to verify. Elvis reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. Inside that envelope were documents that would have destroyed some of the most powerful people in the entertainment industry. Contracts with forged signatures, financial records showing decades of theft, even evidence of blackmail and threats. "I was going to give these to the reporters on Wednesday," Elvis told them, his hands shaking as he held the envelope. "I was going to tell everyone what really happened to Elvis Presley, how they took a poor kid from Tupelo and turned him into a prisoner in his own life." Mike, who had been silent up until this point, asked the question that would change everything. "Mr. Presley, why are you telling us this? Why not your family or your friends?" Elvis's answer would explain everything about that night. Everything about why he chose to spend his final hours with 3 strangers instead of the people who claimed to love him. "Because," Elvis said, tears streaming down his face, "everyone else in my life wants something from me. My manager wants money, my record label wants hits. Even my family wants me to keep being Elvis Presley, the superstar. But y'all just wanted to see me, the real me, and tomorrow I'm either gonna be free or I'm gonna be dead." The conversation that followed would reveal the most shocking secret of Elvis's entire life, something so devastating that when these fans finally shared their story decades later, it would rewrite everything we thought we knew about the king of rock and roll. Jenny, who had been recording the conversation on a small tape recorder hidden in her jacket, something Elvis knew about and had given her permission to do, asked in the question that would unlock the biggest secret of all. "Mr. Presley, what do you mean when you say they turned you into a prisoner?" What Elvis told them next was so incredible that for 40 years, these 3 fans debated whether they should ever share it with the world. Because Elvis Presley revealed that he had been planning his own disappearance for months. The press conference wasn't just about exposing the truth, it was about exposing the truth and then vanishing forever. "I've got a plan," Elvis whispered, looking around to make sure no one was listening. "After I tell the world what really happened, I'm gonna disappear. I've got money hidden away, a new identity, everything I need to start over somewhere else. Because they'll never let me live a normal life as Elvis Presley. But maybe I can find peace as someone else." The 3 fans sat in stunned silence as Elvis continued to reveal details of his escape plan. How he'd been secretly moving money to offshore accounts. How he'd arranged for plastic surgery. How he'd even picked out a small town in South America where no one would ever think to look for Elvis Presley. But then, Jenny asked the question that would make Elvis realize something that would change his mind about everything. "But Mr. Presley, if you disappear, what happens to all the people who love you? What happens to fans like us who need your music to get through hard times?" That's when Elvis went quiet for a long time, and when he finally spoke again, his voice was different, stronger, but also sadder. "You know what, darling? You just made me realize something. Maybe there's another way to handle all this." What Elvis decided in that moment, sitting outside his own gates at 5 a.m. on August 16th, 1977, would determine everything that happened in his final hours. And what these three fans witnessed next would haunt them for the rest of their lives. Elvis stood up, walked to the gates, and did something that no one had ever seen him do before. He pressed his face against the iron bars and looked back at his mansion, his beautiful, expensive prison, and said words that would become his unofficial final statement. "I gave them Elvis Presley the Entertainer for 20 years. Maybe it's time I gave y'all Elvis Presley the Man." Then he handed Jenny the envelope with all the evidence, kissed each of the three fans on the forehead, and walked back toward the mansion. But before he went inside, he turned around one last time and said something that would echo in their minds forever. "If something happens to me before Wednesday, I need y'all to promise me something. Don't let them turn my death into another lie. Don't let them make me into some kind of tragic hero who couldn't handle fame. I want people to know that Elvis Presley died trying to tell the truth." 12 hours later, Elvis was found unconscious in his bathroom. The press conference that would have changed everything never happened. The envelope that Jenny Morrison still keeps in a safety deposit box contains secrets that would rewrite music history. But here's the most incredible part of this entire story, the part that proves Elvis's final night was about so much more than saying goodbye. In 2017, 40 years after that night, Jenny Morrison finally decided to share her story publicly. She brought out the tape recorder, the envelope, and even photographs she'd taken that night. When audio experts analyzed the recording, they confirmed something incredible. Elvis's voice on that tape was stronger, clearer, and more confident than it had been in any public appearance for years. The man who died on August 16, 1977, wasn't the broken, drug-addicted Elvis that the media portrayed. He was a man who had found his courage, made peace with his choices, and spent his final conscious hours doing what he'd always done best, connecting with his fans on the deepest possible level. This incredible story reminds us that sometimes the most important conversations happen in the most unexpected places, with the most unexpected people. Elvis Presley's final gift to the world wasn't another song or another performance. It was the reminder that truth and human connection matter more than fame or fortune. If this story moved you, if it changed the way you think about Elvis's final days, please subscribe to our channel and share this story. Because sometimes the most important truths are hidden in the spaces between what the world knows and what really happened. And sometimes the greatest legends are made not on stage, but in quiet moments when superstars remember how to be human beings.